At Savatthi, the Venerable Kaccana approached the Buddha, bowed down, sat to one side and said, "Venerable Sir, right view, it is said. In what way is there right view?" This world, Kaccana, generally depends on the dual notions of existence and non-existence. But for one who sees the arising of the world as it really is, with right understanding, the notion of non-existence regarding the world does not apply. And for one who sees the passing away of the world as it really is, with right understanding, the notion of existence regarding the world does not apply. This world, for the most part, Kaccana, is shackled by attraction, clinging to systems, and dogmatic adherence. But one with right view does not get involved with or cling to those mental fixations, biases, or obsessions. And does not affirm, "This is myself." They know without doubt or perplexity that what arises is just dukkha or suffering arising. What ceases is just dukkha ceasing. And this knowledge is their own, not dependent on anyone else. This, Kaccana, is what constitutes right view. Everything exists. This is one extreme view. Nothing exists. This is the other extreme. Avoiding both extremes, the Tathagata teaches by way of the middle. Ignorance, or not knowing the truth of the way things really are, is the condition for mental fabrication. Mental fabrication is the condition for sense consciousness. Sense consciousness is the condition for name and form, mentality and materiality. Name and form is the condition for the 6 spheres of sense activity. The 6 spheres are the conditions for sense contact. Sense contact is the condition for feeling. Feeling is the condition for craving. Craving is the condition for clinging. Clinging is the condition for becoming. Becoming is the condition for birth. Birth is the condition for aging and death, for sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair. That is how this entire mass of suffering arises. But with the complete fading away and cessation of that very ignorance, mental fabrication ceases. With mental fabrication ceasing, sense consciousness ceases. With sense consciousness ceasing, name and form ceases. With name and form ceasing, the 6 spheres of sense activity ceases. With 6 spheres ceasing, sense contact ceases. With sense contact ceasing, feeling ceases. With feeling ceasing, craving ceases. With craving ceasing, clinging ceases. With clinging ceasing, becoming ceases. With becoming ceasing, birth ceases. With birth ceasing, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair cease. That is how this entire mass of suffering ceases. In making yourself quiet, you have to be quiet on all fronts. Quiet in your deeds, quiet in your words, quiet in your mind. Only then will you be able to contemplate what's going on inside yourself. If you aren't quiet, you'll become involved in external affairs and end up having too much to do and too much to say. This will keep your awareness or mindfulness from holding steady and firm. You have to stop doing, saying, or thinking anything which isn't necessary. That way your mindfulness will be able to develop continuously. Don't let yourself get involved in too many outside things. In training your mindfulness to be continuously aware, so that it enables you to contemplate yourself, you have to be observant. When there's sensory contact, can the mind stay continuously undisturbed and at normalcy? Or does it still run out into liking and disliking? Being observant this way will enable you to read yourself, to know yourself. If mindfulness is firmly established, the mind won't waver. If it's not yet firm, the mind will waver in the form of liking and disliking. You have to be wary of even the slightest wavering. Don't let yourself think that the slight wavers are unimportant, or else they'll become habitual. Being uncomplacent means that you have to watch out for the details, the little things, the tiny flaws that arise in the mind. If you can do this, you'll be able to keep your mind protected, better than giving all your attention to the worthless affairs of the outside world. So really try to be careful. Don't get entangled in sensory contact. This is something you have to work at mastering. If you focus yourself exclusively in the area of the mind like this, you'll be able to contemplate feeling in all its details. You'll be able to see them clearly, to let them go. So focus your practice right at feelings of pleasure, pain, and neither pleasure nor pain. Contemplate how to leave them alone, simply as feelings, without relishing them. For if you relish feelings, that's craving. Desires for this and that will seep in and influence the mind so that it gets carried away with inner and outer feelings. This is why you have to be quiet. quiet in a way which doesn't let the mind become attached to the flavours of feelings. Quiet in a way which uproots their influence. The desire for pleasure is like a virus deep in our character. What we're doing here is to make the mind stop taking pleasant feelings into itself and stop pushing painful feelings away. It's because we're addicted to taking in pleasant feelings that we dislike painful feelings and push them away. So don't let the mind love pleasure and resist pain. Let it be undisturbed by both. Give it a try. If the mind can let go of feelings so that it's above pleasure, pain, and indifference, that means it's not stuck on feeling. And then try to observe, how can it stay unaffected by feelings? This is something you have to work at mastering in order to release your grasp on feelings once and for all, so that you won't latch onto physical pain or mental distress as being you or yours. If you don't release your grasp on feeling, you will stay attached to it, both in its physical and in its mental forms. If there's the pleasure of physical ease, you'll be attached to it. As for the purely mental feeling of pleasure, that will be something you'll really want, you'll really love. And then you'll be attached to the mental perceptions and labels which accompany that pleasure. The thought formations and even the consciousness which accompanies that pleasure. You'll latch onto all of these things as you or yours. So analyze physical and mental pleasure. Take them apart to contemplate how to let them go. Don't fool yourself into relishing them. As for pain, don't push it away. Let pain simply be pain. Let pleasure simply be pleasure. Let them simply fall into the category of feelings. Don't go thinking that you feel pleasure, that you feel pain. If you can let go of feeling in this way, you'll be able to gain release from suffering and stress, because you'll be above and beyond feeling. This way, when aging, illness, and death come, you won't latch onto them, thinking that you are aging, that you are ill, that you are dying, you'll be able to release these things from your grasp. If you can contemplate purely in these terms, that the 5 khandhas or aggregates are inconstant, stressful, and not self, you won't enter into them and latch onto them as me or mine. But if you don't analyze them in this way, you'll be trapped in dying. Even your bones, skin, flesh, and so forth will become mine. This is why we're taught to contemplate death, so that we can make ourselves aware that death doesn't mean that we die. You have to contemplate until you really know this. Otherwise, you'll stay trapped right there. You must make yourself sensitive in a way which sees clearly that your bones, flesh, and skin are empty of any self. That way you won't latch onto them. The fact that you still latch onto them shows that you haven't really seen into their inconstancy, stressfulness, and lack of self. When you see the bones of animals, they don't have much meaning. But when you see the bones of people, your perception labels them. That's a person's skeleton. That's a person's skull. If there are a lot of them, they can really scare you. When you see the picture of a skeleton, or of anything which shows the inconstancy and non-selfness of the body, if you don't see clear through it, you'll get stuck at the level of skeleton and bones. Actually, there are no bones at all. They're empty. Nothing but elements. You have to penetrate into the bones so that they're elements. Otherwise, you'll get stuck at the level of skeleton. And since you haven't seen through it, it can make you distressed and upset. This shows that you haven't penetrated into the Dhamma. You're stuck at the outer shell because you haven't analysed things into their elements. When days and nights pass by, they're not the only things that pass by. The body constantly decays and falls apart too. The body decays bit by bit, but we don't realise it. Only after it's decayed a lot, when the hair has gone grey and the teeth fall out, do we realise that it's old. This is knowledge on a crude and really blatant level. But as for the gradual decaying that goes on quietly inside, we aren't aware of it. As a result, we cling to the body as being us, every single part of it. Its eyes are our eyes. The sights they see are things we see. The sensation of seeing is something we sense. We don't see these things as elements. Actually, the element of vision and the element of form make contact. The awareness of the contact is the element of consciousness. The mental phenomenon which senses sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations, and all. This we don't realize, which is why we latch on to everything: eyes, ears, nose, intellect, body, and so on, as being us or ours. Then when the body decays, we feel that we are growing old. When it dies and mental phenomena stop, we feel that we die. Once you've taken the elements apart, though, there's nothing. These things lose their meaning on their own. They're simply physical and mental elements, without any illness or death. If you don't penetrate into things this way, you'll stay deluded and blind. For instance, when we chant Jara Dhammami, I am subject to death, that's simply to make us mindful and uncomplacent in the beginning stages of the practice. When you reach the stage of insight meditation, though, there's none of that. All assumptions, all conventional truths get ripped away. They all collapse. When the body is empty of any self, what is there to latch onto? Physical elements, mental elements, they're already empty of any self. You have to see this clearly all the way through. Otherwise they gather together and form a being, both physical and mental. And then we latch onto them as being ourself. Once we see the world as elements, however, there's no death. And once we can see that there's no death, that's when we'll really know. If we still see that we die, that shows that we haven't yet seen the Dhamma. We're still stuck on the outer shell. And when this is the case, what sort of Dhamma can we expect to know? You have to penetrate deeper in. You have to contemplate, taking things apart. You're almost at the end of your lease in this burning house. and yet you continue latching onto it as yourself. It tricks you into feeling fear and love. And when you fall for it, what path will you practice? The mind latches onto these things to fool itself on many, many levels. You can't see through even these conventions, so you grasp hold of them as yourself, as a woman, as a man, and you really turn yourself into these things. If you can't contemplate so as to empty yourself of these conventions and assumptions, your practice simply circles around in the same old place, and as a result, you can't find any way out. So you have to contemplate down through many levels. It's like using a cloth to filter things. If you use a coarse weave, you won't catch much of anything. You have to use a fine weave to filter down to the deeper levels and penetrate into the deeper levels by contemplating over and over again, through level after level. This is why there are many levels to being mindful and discerning, filtering on into the details. And this is why examining and becoming fully aware of your own inner character is so important. The practice of meditation is nothing but catching sight of self-deceptions, to see how they infiltrate into the deepest levels, and to see how even the most blatant levels fool us right before our very eyes. If you can't catch sight of the deceits and deceptions of the self, your practice won't lead to release from suffering. It will simply keep you deluded into thinking that everything is you and yours. To practice in line with the Buddha's teachings is to go against the flow. Every living being, deep down inside, wants pleasure on the physical level, and then on the higher and more subtle levels of feeling, such as the types of concentration which are stuck on feelings of peace and respite. This is why you have to investigate into feeling, so that you can let go of it and thus snuff out craving through being fully aware of feeling as it actually is, free of any self, in line with its nature, unentangled, uninvolved. This is what snuffs out the virus of craving, so that ultimately it vanishes without a trace. If the whole universe can be found in our own body and mind, this is where we need to make our inquiries. We all have the answers within ourselves. We just have not got in touch with them yet. The potential of finding the truth within requires faith in ourselves. The heart is always the place to go. Go home into your heart, where there is warmth, appreciation, gratitude, and contentment. To look for total satisfaction in the world of the senses is a futile endeavour. Since everything changes from moment to moment, where can self and where can satisfaction be found? Everybody is unhappy simply because of unfulfilled desire. Everybody is looking for something that isn't available. Whatever we attempt is a reflection of our inner thirst, which we hope to quench in all these external ways. What we are looking for lies within us. And if we gave our time and energy to an interior search, we would come across it much faster, since that is the only place where it is to be found. Mindfulness is not just a word or a discourse by the Buddha, but a meaningful state of mind. It means we have to be here now, in this very moment. And we have to know what is happening internally and externally. It means being alert to our motives and learning to change unwholesome thoughts and emotions into wholesome ones. Mindfulness is a mental activity that in due course eliminates our habitual mental reactions, which are the cause of suffering. We could become quite satisfied with ourselves because we are sitting in meditation and are endeavouring to practice the spiritual path. Such satisfaction with ourselves is not the same as contentment. Contentment is necessary. Self-satisfaction is detrimental. To be content has to include knowing we are in the right place at the right time to facilitate our own growth. But to be self-satisfied means that we no longer realize the need for growth. trying to achieve something in the spiritual world is just as foolish as trying to achieve something in the material world. There's nothing to achieve. There's only letting go. As we let go more and more of ego identifications, desires, and support systems, bliss will arise. Restlessness and worry are always connected to desire. And when we recognize this and let go of the desire, the heart is purified and the mind is calmed. It is often thought that the Buddha's doctrine teaches us that suffering will disappear if one has meditated long enough, or if one sees everything differently. It is not that at all. Suffering isn't going to go away. The one who suffers is going to go away. Suffering is our best teacher because it hangs on to us and keeps us in its grip until we have learnt that particular lesson. Only then does suffering let go. If we haven't learnt our lesson, we can be quite sure that the same lesson is going to come again, because life is nothing but an adult education class. If we don't pass in any of the subjects, we just have to sit the examination again. Whatever lesson we have missed, we will get it again. That is why we find ourselves reacting to similar situations in similar ways many times. Eventually we will find, mostly in retrospect of course, that we can be very grateful to those people who have made life most difficult for us. The missing link in our practice can only come through the practice of loving kindness towards ourselves, in spite of everything we know about ourselves. Only then will we be able to love others without criticism or judgment. The Buddha compared anger with picking up hot coals with one's bare hands and trying to throw them at the person with whom one is angry. Who gets burned first? The one who is angry, of course. Joy with others, mudita, is a sure antidote for depression. Anybody who suffers from depression is suffering from the lack of joy with others, the lack of sympathetic joy. One cannot always have joyful occasions, or joyful thoughts in one's own life. But if one has joy with and for other people, one can surely find something to be happy about. A truly happy person is someone who is joyfully independent of outer conditions. Contentment with our life as it is brings a feeling of great lightness, for we lose the burden of continually craving for situations and people to be different. Things are as they are. Refusing to accept this creates dukkha, or suffering, and brings pain. It is like pushing against a sealed door. We push and we push until our hands hurt, but we cannot open it. If we are wise, we accept that this is simply how it is. The door is sealed, and it is perfectly all right that it is so. If we want real happiness, the only way it can arise is by letting go of the one who is unhappy. It is not a question of trying to hold on to the one who is happy. Rather, when the unhappy one is relinquished, nothing else remains except the happiness of tranquility and pure awareness. It is not that we kill or annihilate something that actually exists. Rather, we get rid of a deluded mind state.